Hello, this is Steve Melendrez, museum artist, model maker, sculptor, whatever, scientific illustrator. But currently, and for the last 15 years, I've been a teacher. So I'm going to do one of my favorite projects with my students, and I'm going to explain to you what I do with my elementary um, and middle school students mainly. It's on the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, this thing has a lot of sections, and it's going to be broken into part one and part two. Part one is going to be a lecture, which I always combine 80% of my projects with math, history, science, biology, and anything else I can get in there, along with art. I always thought that art should be a kind of an avenue that encompasses all things. And this is just one lesson that I teach my students. And I'm going to do this first part on the lectures that I would do. Now, this is for my fellow art teachers and history teachers if you wanted to spice up a little something, something. And this is one project that my students actually really liked. So the second part is going to be the artwork that's involved and the techniques of how to do it. So that'll be the next video, but this is just going to be the lecture. Now you could obviously delete as much of this as you want, depending on the age of the students you are teaching. It could go into, even, I would imagine, even high school and college. I mean, you could just increase the technical stuff, which I would do, but this is only mainly for middle school. So it's the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, like I said, this is only going to be lectures. I'm going to be lecturing about the Gettysburg Address and explain a little bit more about that. I'm going to do a little lecture on Harriet Tubman, which is one of my favorite people. And this is what I would be explaining to the students. So I'm going to start from the very beginning. I would first ask them, why do they use young people in battle? Of course, I get a lot of random questions. And this is just a way to interact with the students and get them thinking about things, kind of like that outside of the box thing. And anyway, so that's kind of what I would do. And of course, most of the answers they come up with is, well, we're faster, we're stronger. If we get wounded, we could survive. And I said, that's probably true, but that's not why we use you. And they keep thinking, and thinking is a good thing. Now, I don't sugarcoat anything in my rooms. I tell them straight up the truth, what war is all about. And, they may be, playing games of Call of Duty and all these other things, and it's kind of a game and they're doing stuff. But it's not a realistic way of thinking about war. Anyway, so after they exhausted, all the different avenues of why we would use them, I said, no, you follow orders without question. And it's like, oh, no, no, no. I said, well, okay. Now, I'll tell you why I said that. Because there is a little thing, and I know it's a little dirty trick, but it's just my way of getting my point across. So I'll be going on, and of course, these are broken down into different things. So this is not just all lecture for a week or two. This is kind of like the lecture and part of a project, and then I'll wait a few days and add more to the lecture, and then, maybe explain the battlefield or just sequences of lectures in between the drawing and creating part. So eventually, what I start off is we kind of divide the class into two parts. Now, of course, all of them want to fight with their friends, and it's like, no. And I'll explain why I don't let them do that. So I just give them numbers, and I, say, okay, and I just put the papers little right from 1 to whatever, how many students are in there, and I say, okay, I'm going to mix them all up, and whatever you select on, if you're odd, you go over here. If you're even, you go over there. So it just, sometimes they are fighting with their friends, sometimes they're not. And then I explain to you, okay, everybody over here, you're going to pick a general. Once you pick a general, the general will select a lieutenant now, and then same thing on the other side. So what happens is, I explain to him, okay, so if you're a general, you need to read the Gettysburg Address. And I said, okay, but if you are a general, you get 5 lives per battle. And that means, because we have a battle at the end of the class, which the students really enjoy, and your lieutenant gets 3. So the grunts only get 1. So we have like a paper fight battle. Now, I'll get into more of that afterwards, but so they accept that. And sometimes there's more people that want to be a general because they want the 5 lives and, whatever. And they're willing to read the Gettysburg Address. So we do a rock, paper, scissors, but not the way they would do it, looking at each other. We have them face opposite. So they can't see what but the class can see what's going on. So they're witnessing, and they don't know what's going on. So I'll just say, okay, that person has 1, back and forth until we select the general. And that's if there is, more than multiple generals. Okay, so then that's selected. And then I bring the generals in, and we do the same thing. So then I ask the generals, turn around, the other, we're going to do rock, paper, scissors, and then the one side that wins gets to choose if he wants to fight for the North or the South. And then if one person wants to be in the North, then everybody on the other side is going to be fighting for the South. Now I explained I'm going to set up the room, and the South will be on this side, and the North will be here. So just give them a little kind of idea. Okay, so we get that settled out, and one of the things I do is show them how to do the flag, and I'm going to do the demonstration of how to do the North and the South. Now, about 5 years ago, we were having pretty much the same problems we're having now. Kind of the country divided on political views, and I use that as an explanation, explaining this happened, almost 200 years ago, or more, or less, no less. And, we're back here doing the same thing. We're divided up by political points of view. Now, back then, I did it for 10 years, and there was no problems, but I felt kind of like, oh man, some of my students are going to be trying the Confederate flag, and that's going to probably just make parents climb the walls, which I never even thought of doing that. It just, I felt compelled that it's like, wow, it's a different time. So I actually wrote a paper, well, kind of a permission slip, and I said, you're going to take this to your parents, and I gave it to every student that I have. And it's going to have, you're going to need to have them read this and sign it, yes or no. Because I was explaining, and I explained to the students, if there is one parent, just one, that says, no, I don't want my son or daughter drawing a Confederate flag, I would just say, okay, then the class is not going to do that section. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, to my surprise, not one parent said no. And most of them wrote on there is, which we have this critical thing going on right now, was most of them wrote extra stuff on there instead of yes or no. It was like, this is history, and we should know about history and the way it is. And it was just like, wow, I was expecting maybe, eliminating this project for 1 or 2 classes or whatever, but not one parent objected, which was really kind of made my head go. Anyway, so what I do is I show them how the techniques of how to do a flag, and I'll demonstrate that on video too. But I bring up a lecture of Harriet Tubman. Now, she is kind of like my all-time favorite hero, and a lot of people don't know, especially young people, don't know about her. And I explained to her, her name was actually Minty, and she was very tiny. And so they actually, and I don't know if this is where the word came from, but they farmed her out. They used to send her to different farms out there and have her work to make money from. But what they didn't realize is she was learning something that a lot of the other slaves at the time didn't know. She knew where the different farms are, but she also learned a lot of stuff from other people, like where the direction of north is, and the North Star, how it's steady. And I do a little thing on that, but I won't go into that. And so that helped her with that knowledge. She probably didn't even realize I was going to help her. But this is how brave, some people, and I explained to them, is some people are brave for, 2 minutes or, 20 minutes or, one day, where the situation arises. She was brave her entire life, from as a little girl all the way until her end of life. And that's what's so fascinating. When she was a little girl, and I explained to him that an overseer is kind of like a foreman or a boss, but one of the most cruelest humans living, and wouldn't think twice about chopping off parts of the slaves or whipping them to death sometimes, or close to death, because that was property. Um, anyway, so there was a runaway slave, and this little girl saw the runaway slave, and she put herself in front or between the overseer and the runaway slave. And of course, that was not even thought of doing. And this is a little girl. And he was probably, beside himself. And he just looked around, grabbed the heaviest thing. It was a metal object of some kind. I'm not sure exactly what it was. And threw it at a little girl and cracked open her head. I mean, could have killed her. And she did suffer from epilepsy after that blow. But that is who this person was. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And I talk about her life, and a lot of people think, oh, she, actually, some young people actually thought she actually drove a train for the Underground Railroad. And I had to explain to them, no, it was just a term. And a lot of people think, and a lot of people, older people too, thought she saved hundreds of people and did all these trips back and forth and back. And there was a little bit more over than 10, 15, somewhere in that range. I'm not sure exactly how many, but you have to understand, every journey was taking her life in her hands. And it wasn't just like a fast trip. It took time to do this. And when she used to come back, she had a reward on her for dead or alive, and they prefer dead, but it was a big reward. So people were looking for her, but they didn't really understand how clever she was. So nobody would ever think she would come in broad daylight. So that's what she did. And sometimes she would be holding chickens underneath her arm, walking through the middle of the town. And of course, people just couldn't think that would be her, because she's probably from another plantation or whatever, and she's selling the chickens in the store. So she just walked right through. Sometimes she dressed like an old woman as disguises. Now, she took small groups. She couldn't take large groups. But she also used to carry a gun in her. I don't know where she kept it, but she carried a gun. And she explained to the people, if you go with me, there's no turning back. I'll shoot you dead. And apparently she was pretty convincing, because nobody did that. Because she knew, and everybody else knew, if the other people turned back, or even person, they would torture that person until that person told exactly where they were at, and that would sacrifice everybody else. So she was not going to put up with that, and apparently she made it quite clear. So she made these trips back and forth, and that's where, getting to the north was a miracle in itself. And eventually the people that helped these people make this journey to freedom would actually put quilts, and that quilt of a certain kind would actually indicate that this is a safe house. So it was a code. And so between that and then understanding but her first journey, she had no idea. I don't know how she managed, but she knew what north was because of the North Star, and went to freedom. She could have enjoyed her freedom, but came back. And it's just extraordinary with this person. She ended up helping in the Union Army as an Army nurse, and she fought the U.S. government all her life because she figured, she was helping as a nurse and she should be paid, and never was compensated for that, which is kind of a tragedy. Um, anyway, and I could go on with that, and you can do that also. I'm just giving you a small version of what I'd be talking to my students. Anyway, so that's like one lecture I would do. The other one is the Gettysburg Address that I have the students read. So I'll have one student, go 7 years ago, 4 or 5, and they go through that whole thing. And then I'll ask the students, what was the president saying? And they have no idea, because some of them even did this repeating of the Gettysburg Address when they were in elementary, but never knew anything about it. It was just part of memorizing a speech. Well, one of the 10 best speeches. And then on the second student, or general, I would let them go a little bit and then explain what he was actually talking about, and then go a little bit further and explain what he was talking about, like 7 years. It was common knowledge in the crowd that what he was saying just made sense to them. Today we don't know. We just repeat that saying and just move on. So when he was saying 7, he was actually talking, a score is 20 years. So 87 years ago, our forefathers came to this country, which we're doing again. It's like we fought, and he was talking about the Revolutionary War, in case some of you know what I'm talking about. They came here to fight for the freedom of this country. And he was saying, we're doing that same thing now, 87 years later. So, I was just trying to break things down for him, and then he'll go down and I could break it down more, but I'm just going to just give you one more thing. And it says, we're here, and he talks about politicians, and it's like, okay, so we're politicians, and this is what politicians do. We give speeches, but these people gave the full measure of their devotion. And I said, well, what is he talking about there? And I said, the full measure of devotion. And they have no idea. And I said, he was talking about, we're politicians, and this is what we do. But these people actually gave their lives for this country, and that is the full measure of their devotion to this country. And some of them, like, wow. And some of them, and it depends on the age of them, that's always a factor. But anyway, I kind of break it down, and then, so that's another lecture that you could research or not even use or whatever. So by that time, I don't know if you remember in the very beginning of this lecture, sorry this is taking long, but lectures are long, I say, I grab a chair and I go to the middle, and I usually do this towards the end of the period, and I'll just get a chair and I'll stick it in the middle of the room and sit down, and I'll say, okay, I want all the girls on this side, and I want from top highest and to the smallest, and I want the guys over here, and I want them, the tallest guy, and they just hop up and they start ranging, and I just sit there and look and like all of a sudden they're like looking at everybody and trying to measure and rearranging, and I just sit there and as I go, and they're looking at me, and usually one or two of them get it. And I said, what did I say earlier in the beginning of class? You guys do exactly what you're told without question. And then they feel a little ridiculous. It's a fun little trick that I play on them just to get my point across. Doesn't mean you have to do that. And like I said, there's more to these lectures that I would go into, but I'm not, because I do talk about the war. Well, maybe I'll talk about that. What the heck? Because I tell them the truth. And I said, over 50,000 American lives were lost in 3 days because they had 3 battles. And we do have 3 battles in class. And I say, what happened back then is there were so many wounded that most of the time if you couldn't get to the hospital, you just bled out on the field because there was nobody there to take you to the doctor or the hospital. And give them the realities. This was a battle of households. Sometimes brothers fought brothers on a battlefield, or brothers fought fathers because of their political points of view. So sometimes you may have killed your own father, or you come straight up against one of your relatives on the battlefield, and it's not like, you know, doing Call of Duty from a distance. I mean, this is straight looking at another human being right in front of you and either shooting them or sticking them with a blade to see them lose their life that you're responsible for. Different way of fighting. You know, I mean, we're always perfecting weapons, and it just gets more from throwing rocks to kill somebody to bow and arrows to an atlatl with it with more, you know, force and speed, or then, you know, of course, crossbows came. It's always this new generation of how to kill more efficiently, and that's the way we are. And then it came into the Gatling gun, which is kind of, you know, kill more people. Civil War. They used to do something like it was called a grape shot, where there were like little teeny mini balls. So it was like a giant shotgun. But now one of those hit you, it would just take off, you know, parts, because we're talking little cannonballs that come flying out. They had a lot of weapons in there. And we do in the battle. Well, I'll talk about that later. So, like I say, you know, if you made it to the hospital, they didn't have time to give you anesthesia and you know, all that other stuff. It was a production line. And what they did, and that's where they may have got the name for the doctor calling on sawbones, they would hold you down while you're awake and cut off a leg or an arm, and then get a hot iron and cauterize it while you're awake screaming. And then next, and it's just a production line, one after the other, because they needed to stop the bleeding, and there was no time for sewing things up. And that's the way it was. Now, they didn't know about germs and that kind of stuff during the battle. So if you survived the battlefield and you survived having limbs cut off, you usually ended up dying anyway because of the infection. So like I said, I'm pretty brutal about what's going on, and I, you know, the sixth graders, I don't really get into that much kind of detail, but the seventh and eighth graders, you know, they're okay with it. And I ask them, you know, it's going to get brutal if anybody objects to it. I always give them a choice. I won't talk about it, but you know, most of them, you know, they want to hear what's going on. They want to know the truth, which another thing that I enjoyed. Anyway, so we go through that.